Next up, Congressman Casten, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I want to just make a comment. My friend from Ohio just made the point that China has no binding commitments, and it's true. None of us do. The way that Paris was structured was to have voluntary non-binding commitments, to create a framework for all of us to try to build to something more permanent. We are uniquely the only country that looked at voluntary non-binding commitments and decided that was too hard. And so Trump pulled out. Now, I share that because when we were in Madrid, shortly after being pulled out, many of us on this committee, one of the Europeans pulled me aside and he said, I just want to let you know that bad things happen when the United States doesn't lead. And that is the moment that we are in by conscious choice of the former president, and frankly, by conscious choice of 40 years of policy where our story to the world has been, let me tell you about the complexities of the US Senate. That's on all of us. For us to lead, we need to have the economic muscle to do that. Check, we got it. We need to be the leading advocate in the world for equity and equality and democracy. Check, we've got that box. And then we need to show that we have actions to match our words. And we have failed at that for 40 years. Now, I share that background because we've had those two of the three. There are other countries in the world that have at least one of those and are trying to come up with two, but they can't match our commitment to democracy. And Mr. Meyer, you've been at this as long as anybody, certainly on the panel, maybe as long as anybody in this room. As I look back over history, the last time that the United States actually led and had all three of those was when the Montreal Protocol was structured. I would point out under the Reagan and first Bush White House. I wonder if you could just share your wisdom of what we did right when we put that together and what we are missing in the current political zeitgeist in America to do what we did before when we did fix a problem, right? What can you share with us?
Thank you, Congressman. Let me first try to clarify this issue of bindingness. The Paris Agreement is binding on all countries to put forward what are called nationally determined contributions. So it's bottom up. Each country decides what they can do and they commit to do it. And it is binding on every country to report on how well they are doing in meeting those commitments. It is not binding on all countries to meet those commitments because of the United States Senate. Because if the agreement had required each country to meet those commitments, it would have required submitting it to the Senate for ratification. And President Obama knew there were not 67 votes in the Senate to ratify. So the reason it's not binding to meet the commitments is because of the United States. On the Montreal Protocol, that is a success story. It really has worked very well. And it was driven by science, including by Maggie Thatcher, who was the conservative prime minister of England at the time, of the United Kingdom. And she persuaded President Reagan to support a negotiation of the Montreal Protocol. That being said, it is a much easier problem to solve because it deals with a much smaller set of economic actors. And those economic actors realized two things. One, they could make a lot of money by producing the alternatives to the substances that were destroying the stratospheric ozone layer. And two, if their products did destroy the stratospheric ozone layer, they could be on the hook for a lot of lawsuits and a lot of liability and compensation. So we were able to work with business, with other countries to get that in place. It is a good model, but it's not entirely analogous because of the differences. We have to mobilize action across every sector of the economy. Every major country needs to participate. And as we've heard, it's a much tougher problem than the ozone.
Well, I know I'm close to time. I guess I would just offer that and I agree with all those points, but a lot of that framework was then adopted into the 1990 amendments to the Clean Air Act, which we did for acid rain, which had a different set of economics. But we have shown with U.S. leadership that we can create a cap and trade model to monetize the reduction of environmental. And with the time I got left, Ms. Franzen, converting to clean energy is converting to cheap energy. So much of what we're trying to do in the Build Back Better is to make sure that we deploy the capital so that people can benefit from cheap energy. And whether that's building out EV charging stations or tax credits, we've at least thought about how to do that in the United States. If you have a solar panel on your roof, you don't pay for electricity anymore. It's pretty awesome. If you have an electric vehicle, you don't pay for gasoline anymore. It's pretty awesome. Everybody who tells you that we can't afford to do this basically would fail a freshman capital budgeting class, but I digress. What, Mrs. Franzen, should we be thinking about internationally to make sure that folks in other countries also have access to those capital deployments so that they can benefit from cheap, clean energy.
Thank you. I think, first of all, as has already been underscored, the role of the US in leading on innovation on these technologies to get them to exist in the first place, and second, on deployment to have economies of scale bring costs down is fundamentally critical. So I would start there. And beyond that, I think the kind of support for countries, especially poor countries, a number of folks have experience in Africa and in much less developed contexts, support for those countries in the form of climate finance is also a critical part of the equation. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing us to go a little over. I yield back.